everyone, and happy Friday. I'm pleased to call the May State Advisory Council on Indian Education meeting to order. Before we proceed, I would like to kindly remind everyone that the session is being live streamed on YouTube, and we warmly welcome our online listeners who are joining us. At this time, Dr. Silver will do a roll call.
Good morning, everyone. When I call your name, you can just unmute yourself and let us know that you are present so we can officially determine a quorum. Amanda Frazard.
Present.
Angelique Jacobs-Young.
Present.
Randy Jacobs.
Present.
Calvin Locklear.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Dorothy Stewart-Yates.
Present.
Jeremiah Moore.
Present.
Cameo Lanning. Stacey Lynch. Stephen Bell.
Present.
Thank you. Tamara Carter.
Present.
Will Paul.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. LaRonda Lowry.
Present.
Representative Jarrett Lowry. Representative Edward Godwin. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. Before we proceed, our first order of business is approval of today's agenda. We have the agenda before us. May we have a motion to adopt the agenda as printed?
This is Dorothy Yates. Motion to accept the agenda.
This is Stephen Bell. I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. I trust that everyone's had an opportunity to review the March minutes. If so, may we get a motion to approve the March minutes?
It's LaRonda. I make a motion that we approve the March minutes.
Tamara Carter, second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. Thank you, guys. First,
Chairwoman Lockley, before you proceed, just wanted to note Cameo Lanning has joined the meeting, so we'll add her.
okay, thank you. Welcome, Cameo. Our first item on the agenda are our North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs updates. Mr. Greg Richardson, thank you for joining us on behalf of the commission. Mr. Richardson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear. It's great to be with you this morning, and I'm always so honored that you all take time to give us some space on the agenda to kind of give a quick update. Want to first, though, check in to make sure that you can hear me okay. I am having some difficulty with new install on my computer, so I'm having to use my screen and my telephone as my microphone. So I just want to make sure that I'm coming through clearly and that you can hear me. Is that, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. We can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank you all for the work that you do out there to support our students. Indian education in our communities is so important. And I know that as we all have challenges in our work, I also know that teachers and the educational system has always had and still continue to have some major challenges. And so on behalf of the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, I want to express a hearty thank yous for what you do. And I'm sending those thank yous on behalf of our chairman, Ricky Burnett, and the secretary of our Department of Administration, Secretary Pam Cashwell. There's a lot of things going on these days, and there's a lot of negativity out there, but I'm not going to weigh in on the negativity. I'm going to weigh in on the positive things that are going on and the opportunities that we have as our people. As I see it, as far as Indian education, we're by far ahead right now, than more so ahead than we've been at any point in history. I think we can all agree that we have more college graduates out there. We have more students in post-secondary education out there who are doing some absolutely good work in supporting other things in our communities and helping us to get other goals accomplished out there across the state. As a result, though, we have many more voices in key positions across the state and the nation than we've ever had. Lumbee, Hallawasaponi, Coharie, Waccamaw, Siouan, I mean, we could just go on and on and on about key people who just this week had a presence on a regional and national stage, that being the National Congress of American Indians, which is a conference coming up just in a few weeks from now up in Cherokee. We had an excellent meeting at the White House this week where Chief Oglethra Richardson and Sunshine Richardson of our Commission of Indian Affairs was present at the White House to talk about rural economic needs in our rural communities and our plight to get more funding in our communities for our schools and economic development, et cetera, et cetera. So again, you know, capitalizing on those positive things that we have across our state and nation with our people who are in key places. And also, I've got to mention Secretary Pam Cashwell. You know, she's Lumbee Coharie, and she's serving here at the Department of Administration as Secretary, and she's the only American Indian that we've had to serve in a cabinet level position. So I don't have to tell you about the importance of that and the significance of that when you've got a secretary sitting at the cabinet meeting with the governor and all of the other lead people in the state, the secretaries of other departments in state government. That means a lot to us in terms of having that voice there and to be able to get some things done. So I have to say with all that, you know, you at Stacey, and so part of that effort in the state to make things better for all of us. And I'm so happy to see that you've got the Indian Education Director position funded. I kind of thank the superintendent for that, Representative Lowry, and all of those who had a role to play in getting that position established at DPI. And I know from being an older guy here that many years ago, we had a similar operation or a similar position there with Betty Mangum serving in a key position there. And we know there was tremendous benefit in that, and that's not to say that we don't have really good things going there at DPI now. We still do, and we still have key people in key roles like Dr. Silver and many others who help us to get this work done. But your role as SACE members and as an organization that is deep-rooted in legislation, you have a key place at the table. So I have to say that I think that Chairman Locklear, Dr. Locklear, without the support of SACE and without the work that you've done behind the scenes to keep that topic out front, we would not perhaps have this position in place and be in a position where we're now going into a role of being able to conduct interviews and make a selection for a new historic position at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So I also have to thank Dr. Olivia Oxendine, who's an American Indian member of the State Board of Education, and I have to think that, you know, her seat at that table has made a great difference in terms of all of this coming together and happening. So my hat is off to Stacey this morning for all the work that you do, and the way that you conduct that work is so impressive too, because it's always in a very professional manner. And then the annual report that you produce is also something that we are very proud of in North Carolina. I make mention of that report in my circles and many state meetings and national meetings. In every state, I'm sure you know, every state out here does not have that kind of report where there's an annual report on the accomplishments and achievements of our students in in our school systems throughout our state. So another shout out to Stacey and what you all are doing, Dr. Locklear, in terms of making a key difference in Indian education in this state. We are now working on our legislative agenda for the next biennium, and we have a legislative day that's getting ready to roll out the 29th, and we're going to have a group of a very tight-knit group that's going to be meeting with Representative Lowry, the Speaker, and other lead members of the General Assembly on Tuesday, May 29th, and there'll be a day meeting. So we're inviting the chiefs and the chairs of our tribes to come and have that sit down over at the General Assembly. This is something that we have not done in many years, probably getting into the area of about 20 years now. We haven't had a legislative day where we actually set aside a day for the commission to go and its tribal leaders to go and sit down with members of the General Assembly. So in short and long, it'll be a day of helping us to help. Sorry about that. It'll be a day set aside to do some strategy building, conduct some discussions with legislators on our needs. Now, the key thing that we're going to be asking for there is an area of the state that we feel has been lacking, and that is some dedicated funding for our tribes. And that's not to say we're going to be able to get that on the agenda of the General Assembly for this session, but what we're doing is planning to set the stage in the short session, and then know that a lot of new things probably will not get into the budget for this next fiscal year, but for the long session coming up, we hope to stage ourselves where we're going to be in a position where we'll be able to get some dedicated funding for our tribes in our state to help them do their work, because they do some monumental work. These tribal governments are doing some of the same things as county governments and city governments, maybe with the exception of water and sewage and some other things, but our tribes serve a great need in our communities, and we have to be working behind the scenes to help them get in a position where they can continue that work. We are also working through the Secretary's office to build what we call in the government budget strategy session in the governor's budget, to have funding placed in the governor's budget for what we call and have built it out to be is an Indian Youth Leadership Program, which will be funded through the commission. And we are also seeking funds to conduct some work in terms of Indian child welfare, which is a great need in our state. May not realize this, but we have some critical issues with our children in our state. We found that there's quite a few of our children now in foster care, and you know, these are things that comes with any society. We're not the only population that have issues relating to Indian child welfare, but we do know that there's a severe lack of foster care, American Indian foster care parents. So the short and long there, until we can resolve that problem and conduct some real advocacy in that area, more and more of our children are going to be going into foster care. And a lot of those children are being placed in foster care outside of the American Indian community, away from their culture and their people. So we feel that that's something that we just have to drill down and see what can be done through legislative action to help us address that issue. Fortunately, in the last budget year for the General Assembly, rather, we were successful in getting a grant manager position funded, and we're just like you all in the process now filling that position. We have posted it, it has closed, and we'll be conducting our interviews on the 28th and 29th. The hope there is that we'll be able to have a dedicated staff person here to actually write grants and to go after other funding that might help with funding for tribes and other efforts in our state. We also received notice this week that we're going to get funding to continue our tobacco survey efforts. This is where we're conducting a statewide survey to determine the impact of tobacco smoke and illnesses related to that. That information is going to be shipped over to the CDC, and this is a grant through the Department of Health and Human Services, which is a flow-through grant from the CDC to the Health and Human Services to the Commission of Indian Affairs. So we're so pleased that we're going to be able to continue that work. Upcoming is our June commission meeting, and in June we're going to have 8 commission members, I believe. Their terms are going to be ending in June, and as it is per our statute, those members can return to the commission, or those members can be replaced with new appointees, but those decisions are made by our tribes and organizations. So we've notified all the tribes about the vacancies coming up in June, and then we'll be swearing in those members who will be either coming back or the new members at our September annual meeting of the Commission of Indian Affairs. And I had mentioned the National Congress of American Indians meeting. That will be coming up in Cherokee. We are going to sponsor a number of commission members to attend the national conference. Our tribes are going to be sending representatives there as well. And then finally, we try as much as we can to support NCNAO, the youth conference, and the youth conference is coming up in June. We'll have a series of workshops, and our staff will be involved in some of those workshops on June 21st. And we are sponsoring up to 30 students who will be able to attend the NCNAO conference, and we basically set the stage right now to cover their registration and some other miscellaneous expenses for up to 30 students out of our commission funds. So we're working with NCNAO with that, and everything is pretty well set right now for the conference. So we want to continue to supporting those efforts. We have an initiative with Campbell University that I just wanted to highlight because it's an education effort. This is a tribal leaders cohort that was started last year. They're ending their first series this week. I'll be heading down there this afternoon at 3 o'clock to meet with Campbell University staff about that. And right now we're getting ready to advertise the next cohort. So if you know people who are interested in being a part of the Tribal Leaders Cohort at Campbell University, send me a name and email address so that I can get that information over to Dr. Alfred Bryant down at Campbell University. It's a good effort. The idea here is that we put tribal council members, commission staff, tribal staff who are emerging leaders in our communities. This can be members of SACE also who have an ambition maybe later on to become a tribal council member or to work at the commission or serve on SACE. Any of these governing bodies that we have out there to deal with Indian affairs, we're trying to put in place a system through which before they get to the table, they have some baseline information about the work of Indian affairs, the funding streams for tribes, working in a tribal government setting, some of the challenges, some of the things that you have to deal with. So when they get to that table, they will know basically significant information about the grants that the tribes administer, the governing documents of the tribes. Some of our tribes have a constitution. Lumbee has a constitution. Haliwasaponi, Coharie, most of the other tribes operate through a governance structure relating to the use of bylaws and other documents that's authorized by the tribal leadership and the citizens of the tribe. So those are just some quick highlights, Dr. Locklear, that I wanted to mention and leave with you all. Again, we have relocated. I think I mentioned that, but we moved our operation to 325 Salisbury Street, which is right across from the Legislative Office building downtown. All of our phone numbers and email addresses are the same, and we're just across the street from where we were before because they're tearing down the old Department of Administration building. So with that, Dr. Locklear, if there are any questions, I'll remain on standby.
Mr. Richardson, I do have one question. Is there a possibility of extending an invitation to to having a SACE representative for the legislative meeting that you mentioned?
That is kind of a call beyond my pay grade. Representative Lowry and the commission chairman and the commission chairman and the chairman of the commission's legislative committee has set the agenda and pretty much defined the list of attendees. What they want to have is a very concise group, since this is the short session. And there will not be a lot of time, so there's focusing really on a concentrated small group, but they're also focusing on 2025 for the next series of a legislative day, and that right now is the plan for that is to be a larger venue with quite a few more people involved. So at this point, I think the agenda and everything's pretty well set. But if you'd like for me to pose that question to our chair, I'd be happy to do that and get back with you.
Yes, sir. We would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Richardson? Mr. Richardson, thank you for those most informative updates. We appreciate all the work and your leadership in the commission and all you do for making our Indian communities progress and move forward. Thank you for all your help getting that American Indian Director position posted as well. So we appreciate you and your commitment to SACE. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, and have a good day. Unfortunately, I have another meeting pushing me right now, and I won't be able to stick around. But anyway, keep up the good work. And again, I'm just honored to be with you, and we'll be back with you later on if I'm invited. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Next on our agenda is our science standards update. We welcome Dr. Charles Aiken to provide those updates from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Welcome, Dr. Aiken.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, and good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We were here, I think it was about a year ago when we first launched, actually probably longer than that, might almost be 2 years ago, when we first sort of launched this process. So I really appreciate the opportunity just to kind of come back and I wouldn't say close the loop, but let you know kind of where we are in this process. Your help was invaluable in designing the standards. And so we just kind of wanted to share where we are and be able to answer any questions that we can. The first couple of slides, just want to kind of introduce the team. I don't know who kind of has that. There we go. So this is our science team. There are 4 members that deal directly with the science. We have an elementary science consultant, that's Deborah Hall. We kind of really have 3 secondary science consultants, and they're broken up. Gavin Fredell, it says secondary, primarily handles our middle school science. Miss Tipton and Miss Wood, they divide up the high schools. Miss Tipton typically does our life sciences, so that's biology and earth and environmental science. She's our expert in those areas. And then Miss Alexis Wood handles our physical sciences, so that's physical science, physics, and chemistry. And of course, we also work with STEM. So Howard Ginsberg is our K-12 integrative STEM specialist. He works with a number of teams, science and math just being 2 of those. And then myself. The QR code will take you to our contact information. So please, anytime you need us, please feel free to reach out. And the next slide, we always like to just make sure that everyone knows where they can get updates and stay in tune with things. So you can kind of probably click through, I think several pictures just sort of show up. But we are really excited. So you can go to the DPI site. If you go to the academic standards, it's always the bottom left-hand square. That takes you to kind of the full list of the things that we have available. And then if you click on the standard course of study, I think it's kind of loading slow. You can find actually all of them. So math, science, healthful living, ELA, and then if you click on science, you'll see some of our information. But we are really, really excited to announce the team is meeting actually at this very second. We are building a brand new Canvas site that we will post a link on that science page too. But we're going to try to put all of our information, all of our standards, our resources, professional development, newsletters. We're going to put everything in one site. And this is something that we always stress. The Department of Public Instruction has a significant number of newsletters that anyone can sign up for. And we always encourage people to please sign up. Our science, math, and STEM teams do send out one every month. It's generally the week right after the state board meeting, not always, but it's usually right around within those first 10 days of the month. So we just really encourage people to use that as well. It's a great opportunity to kind of see what's going on in the world of science, math, or STEM. All right, so I think the next slide kind of start getting in here. I won't make everybody take the poll. We've done this training. We always put this in here. This is sort of where we really are at right now as we continue to try to get the word out. It's always interesting with our different audiences to ask them to kind of tell us where they think they are. In every room, we still get all four. We will have people who have definitely read every single word of the standards and the crosswalks. We still work with some people who are asking, they didn't know we even had new standards. So we see a lot. We see much less of number 4 now. We're seeing mostly number 2, a couple of number 3s. So a very typical bell curve at this point. But this is kind of why I'm here today, and we're going to try to continue being out there, is just trying to build that familiarity. All right, so the next slide, I think, kind of sets the tone for really what this whole process was all about. And that was thinking about what science looks like in our classrooms. And we use this picture a lot. While we do have some great examples of wonderful, engaging science instruction across our state, unfortunately, more of it still kind of looks the way it did a long time ago. And this really was the driving force behind kind of where we went with our science standards. So the next slide, please. So what is new? Really, the main thing that we always say is that the content in our in all of our science courses really hasn't changed significantly. There was movement between some grade levels. The writers thought, well, this piece of content might be better in a different grade level. We've learned over time, maybe it was a little too challenging, or maybe it needed to go up. But what's really new is the standards. And so one thing is the standards were written in large part utilizing research out of a publication called A Framework for K-12 Science Education. It is not actually new. It was actually published right after our last standards were adopted. I think this one was published, its original version was published in 2011, and we had just updated our standards in 2009. So it's not actually new. It just took us a little while to be able to get back to that because we had just updated our standards the last time, right before this publication came out. So a couple things. No, it's okay. You can click. There's a couple lines there. So really, what this research did for us was lay out that we wanted 2 things within our standards. One is content, and so we're all used to that. North Carolina's been a leader when it comes to our science content. What was new is the inclusion of the science and engineering practices. And that really kind of gets to that slide just before you saw that picture of students sort of sitting in the rows, sitting in tables, listening to somebody talk to them about science. And the science and engineering practices really were developed to help students do the science. We wanted students engaging with it, being active with it, not simply being participants to just listen to a teacher tell them about science. So those are the 2 dimensions. Our standards are now written. They always will start off with a phrase that says what students will be doing. It could be conduct an investigation. It could be create an argument to explain a certain point of view. It could be to use math to analyze data. There's 8 of them that I'll show in a second. And then you'll always see the content. So they're always paired together in every place. And this does really open up, we hope, a lot of new opportunities to assess. So not always just assessing content, but also assessing how well are our students learning to do the science, to plan and conduct an investigation, to analyze charts and data and think about what does that mean for me when I plan my investigation, to create an argument and think about what are the pros and cons of something, what does the evidence tell me. So those are some of the kind of things that we want students doing, and we think this now gives us a chance to measure both things. Content, which is critical, they have to know the basics, but we also want them to be able to use that information, and we think there's now a chance to do a little bit of both. So next slide. So just sort of kind of the layout. Oh, yep, you're good. So lay out the way the science kind of develops across K-12. There are what we call 3 big domains. So there's physical science, which is present in almost all of our K-8 courses. Earth space science, which again, you'll see it's scattered out throughout K-8. And then of course, this is the basis of our earth and environmental course. And then the life sciences. So that's the basis for biology at the high school level. But again, you'll see it scattered throughout our K-8. And then each of those is broken up into smaller chunks or strands. Really not a lot new here. A couple things since the last time what North Carolina had revised our science standards. You'll see there's one under the physical science. The last one says waves and their application. Over the last 10, 12 years, that ended up becoming more and more a bigger chunk of the science we need kids to learn. So that one ended up with its own one. The other ones really haven't changed a whole lot. Some of the titles have changed. So there was some movement within the content that we then wanted to mimic. But the big one was a whole new strand just focusing on this. All right, I think next slide. So I mentioned that the science and engineering practices. So these are the 8 what we call SEPs. So a couple of things I always tell people, they're not ranked. This is not in order. This is not a priority list. It's really just to put a number to them so you know which one you're talking about, any one thing. A lot of our professional development so far has really focused on this part. And we work with teachers, school leaders, district leaders, and what we've been doing is kind of taking participants through thinking about each of these practices, how they look different going from K to through 12th grade. Certainly what you would want students doing in kindergarten is going to look very different than what you might expect an 11th or 12th grader to do. So we spend a lot of time on that. We also spend time thinking about how can they assess these things? What are some things they can be looking for, planning for, and then thinking about how they might actually model for students, how to do some of these things, how they really overlap. One of the other things that we've really been stressing is you really can't do any one of these without doing at least a couple of the other ones at the same time. And I think that's been really exciting for the teachers. And for our teachers that have been leaders in this, it's been a wonderful reward for them to know that, yes, what they have been doing, and those teachers that really have had students doing labs and planning investigations and thinking about problems and coming up with, hypotheses and really conducting, using the scientific method throughout their course, maybe not just for one unit, but for every unit. This has really been, I think, something that's made them know and feel good that they have been doing the right thing. So this has really been the focus of our professional development, and I think the thing that is the newest piece to our standards in North Carolina. So next slide. And we'll just touch on this quickly. I mentioned that we spend time talking them through, thinking about summaries and progressions. This is just a quick screenshot of some of the resources that we share, and we spend time with teachers, and we divide them up in their areas of responsibility. If they're elementary, we try to tend to divide them into, teaching more K2, 3, 5, and then our middle and high school courses. And we just give them some opportunity and some guidance to be thinking about what these SEPs look like. We don't want people thinking that we're saying that we expect every student to perform at the same rate, depending on where they are developmentally. And so there's some great resources out there that really help teachers plan that out based on their grade level. Next slide. So just to give you a sense, this comes from a lot of different resources. Mentioned the K-12 science education you see on there. We do utilize the NAEP framework, and they're actually undergoing their own revisions. And some of our members on the science team are actually part of that work. So we had some inside information that we were able to kind of utilize. We also, two of the books that we use with our participants and our writers, one is called The Disciplinary Core Ideas, that's put out by the National Science Teacher Association. And then another one that we've used a lot from the same organization is called Helping Students Make Sense of the World. That one we've used a lot for thinking about how to plan with content and the SCPs in conjunction. What I really wanted to mention, North Carolina is a leader in working with our non-formals and thinking about environmental education and thinking about, you know, where a student lives and being able to use that. That was also something that we heard from a number of our groups, and the standards were really written in a way that we want our students and our teachers, when they're thinking about science and they're thinking about the units and model and lessons that they're going to be using, to use their immediate environment, use their community. We want students who live at the coast to really be able to think about what's the science around me that I can be working with. And how is that similar but different to a student who might be living in the Sandhills, who might be living in the Northeast, who might be living in the mountains? Allow them and their teachers to really use their immediate environment. And we go to conferences around the country, and one of the things that we find is that the work that we're trying to do with environmental educators and our non-formal educators, whether they be anything from, say, someone who runs a park to someone who does work with soil erosion or with beach nourishment or river nourishment. It's really been great to hear and see that we're a leader in that. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that, because that is definitely something that I want everyone to take away, is that the standards have been written in a way that we certainly expect students to be able to use their immediate environment and their community as a source of information, as a source of some of their activities and their work. So next slide. So the other thing that we've really tried to do, obviously, is attach this to the Porch River Graduate. And this was a kind of a diagram that a number of the groups within the Office of Academic Standards have kind of put together. But, you know, the big takeaway was we want students now being active doing the science. We definitely want our students and our teachers to be able to take advantage of their local environment, any local industries and businesses that are out there, and then to really show our students that there's a connection between what they're doing in school and the workforce. And whether that's, you know, a student who wants to go right into the workforce, there's so many things in North Carolina across our state, opportunities for in science, or if they want to go to a 2-year community college, or if they want to go 4 years or 8 years, whatever it is, when they're thinking about hitting the workforce, we really wanted to connect that back to the classroom, so that when a student asks that question, why am I learning this? We have a ready answer, as opposed to sometimes I think, you know, we don't have a great answer. We say, well, you need it for next year. We want to get rid of that and say, if you're interested in any field, I can show you how what you're learning about in science right now connects to that. And sometimes that really is the your durable skills. So another thing that we always want to make sure we mention is North Carolina is a local control state. So what that kind of means is at the Department of Public Instruction, we set the standards, but then local school systems and schools really pick up from there and develop their local curriculum, which we really, again, you know, I emphasize kind of why we want it to be able to be that way, which then obviously should drive the instruction. A lot of our professional development sort of helps connect folks between standards and a little bit of the curriculum. We do some basic pedagogy. A lot of our work with the science and engineering practices really is kind of on the instructional end, helping them think about their strategies and ways to differentiate. But the middle step is definitely something that we want being developed at the local level to make it as relevant to those students and teachers as possible. So next. So the thing I am most excited about, and you can probably click 5 or 6 times. So we are getting ready, and I think we're hoping. I'm going to say early next week. I don't want to peg it. I think it'll be one of the first 2 days of next week. We will be releasing our new support documents. We used to call them unpacking documents, and all they really were was a rephrasing of the content. Hopefully made it a little bit more readable. But what we're getting ready to launch is a brand new support document that's going to have lots of things in it to help guide our teachers. It will be open to the public. Anyone can see it, including our non-formal educators. They'll get a great idea of what we are sort of building for our classrooms. RBT, just so you know, that's revised Bloom taxonomy. That's the verb. So, you know, that's like when we say analyze or assess or understand, that's the verb. We'll have lots of information about what the SEP could look like. Cross-cutting concepts is something that helps connect one concept across a range of other science concepts or even non-science concepts. We're really trying to show integration with science in other areas. The core ideas, that's just the content. We're going to add stuff on proficiency statements to try to give folks an idea of what, if a student has learned it, what does that look like when they're proficient at that particular concept. We're going to have academic language. We tend not to say vocabulary because we don't want folks focusing on just a word. We want them to understand how that fits into a larger set. I think there's even more on that slide, things that we're excited about. So, and of course our reference tables. So it should come out very early next week. And then we'll continue to add things like parent guides, future profession development. But I'm really excited about these. I've worked in North Carolina for, this is my 27th year. I've not known us to release a single document that's going to have all of it. And we'll have one of these for every grade level and for each of the 5 high school courses. So more to come on that, but very, very exciting. And then the assessment examples, we're still building working with teachers. So what have we done so far? Already on the DPI website, you can already see the actual new standards and the crosswalks. Last fall, we actually did a full day professional development for each of the state board regions where we met with district leaders, school leaders, and in some cases, some teachers, just going through what all's happened. Obviously, a much longer version of what I've just shared with you. We have been working with, we've been conducting some science office hours, discussing how this might play out with testing accountability. We've done some pre-training on our new support documents. We are working with testing accountability also to begin developing the new science assessments. And then, as I mentioned, next week we'll be launching our new support documents in our new Canvas course. So I think that was it. It's a lot of information thrown at you. Again, you can find our science contact information. Definitely encourage anyone who's interested to sign up for those listservs, stay informed. Like I said, we send those out. And I just want to thank you for a chance to be here. And you know, I can assure you, we did take a lot of the feedback that we got from working with everyone 2 years ago into these standards. We're really excited. You will see them go officially into effect with the upcoming school year. So this last year has been just building the knowledge base, getting resources ready. And our teachers will start in July for our year-round colleagues and August for our traditional. So sorry to throw all that on you. I will stop and answer any questions and just say, Dr. Locklear, thank you for letting me be here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Aiken at this time?
Dr. Locklear, I have a question.
You may proceed.
Hey, Mr. Aiken.
Hello, sir.
A middle school principal, so I have 2 questions that I want to ask, just to get a little bit of clarity on what this will look like in our buildings. So as we know, like on the middle school level across the state, like science is a saving grace for many of us in terms of data. So like when we look at physical science, earth science, and life science, even on our check-ins, they're pretty consistent. So by switching the model, so what I hear is like instead of it being like lecture-based or sit and get, they're going to be more like hands-on and have some place-based learning. What is the anticipation in terms of the data? Are we anticipating that this will like overall improve scores, or are we saying we just want to remain where we currently are, or we don't know yet? But like what I'm asking is like, what is the current anticipation that this revamping of like the instructional framework, will it automatically improve scores, or we're not sure where we're going with that yet?
So I'm always going to be hesitant to say what we expect. Here's what I hope.
Okay.
We know the research shows that the more students are actually using the content, any content, doesn't matter whether it's science or math or anything else, if they're using it in the context for which that skill is needed, then they perform at a higher rate. So in the long term, I absolutely do think that we should see it. And I agree. I'm a former middle school principal, middle school director, and I know for a lot of my schools, my 5th and 8th, and even biology in some cases, we're saving graces. So I do think in the long run we will see that. What we also know historically is there's an implementation dip. So I'm hesitant to say we'll see an immediate bounce up. What I keep stressing the most is if you've got a teacher that you have felt confident knows the content of what they've been doing, other than some small movement on the periphery, the core of each of the grade levels and the content areas has not appreciably changed. And if you're not sure, definitely have them see the crosswalks. They have been out. They can definitely see anything that's happened to their particular grade level. If you have a teacher that has already been confident and comfortable with having students engaging with it, doing hands-on work. Like for one example, I think the question we get the most about is modeling. And they said, well, we're going to need a lot of new stuff from models. And we've had to really try to work to step people back and say, don't always assume that a model means you're going to have some 3D table or some massive thing you're going to build. Modeling can be having students act something out. Modeling can be drawing. Modeling can be building something. I don't ever want to hold anybody back. But, I saw a teacher present one time who talked about, if you've got a globe is a model. It's a model of the earth. You can use that. So as a principal, the first thing I would want you to think about is, what do you see your students doing? And if they are up and involved and going outside, and if they're taking advantage of anything around the building, that's a step in the right direction. Do you see your teachers using the math? And maybe one of the other sort of things that we hope is an intentional but accidental domino is getting our math and science teachers really coordinating more often and thinking about data analytics and teaching charts and tables and graphs. And are our students building those kind of things to measure data or measure their experiments and then figuring out what does that tell me? That's, I think, the thing that we're probably going to see. We're working with our testing accountability folks. Future check-ins and EOGs and EOCs will contain both types. There will still be questions based on content, but then there will be questions, they're calling them question sets, where the student will be presented with a scenario or a phenomena or a chart, and then a series of questions that require some content knowledge, but really emphasize the SEP in question. Are they able to use math and some data analysis? Are they able to kind of construct an argument based on what they're seeing, something that would make sense? That, I think, is where we may see the most challenge, but that really depends on the culture of the school and the teachers that are there. And we know that, I think, in some places, they're dying for this and they've been begging this for a while. In other places, it may be more of a change, just depending on the teacher's comfort level. So long answer to your simple question. Long term, I feel great about where we are. I think it's a huge leap forward for our science. Initially, I think it's going to depend on the teacher's comfort level with active teaching.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I have one more question. I'll make it quick.
I'll try to be quick too.
Yeah. So I noticed that you put in here like the proficiency statements would be provided What I instantly gravitate towards in my head is like a know and show chart. Is that something similar to that, or am I?
It will not present that way in the documents themselves because the no-show chart. I'm thinking you're thinking like the NCLA work that's been going around. So it won't look quite like that, but what it will have is for each objective. So it'll have a standard, and for every objective, we're going to repeat that chart that I showed you, where we'll have the revised Blooms and the academic language and proficiency statements. So it's not only for every standard, but actually it'll break down by every objective. And the idea was to give the teacher kind of if a student can demonstrate X, that'll tell you they're proficient. So kind of an end in mind, like if you start there and say, okay, well, how do I measure that and go backwards? That's what we hope, is that a teacher can kind of go to, now we don't want it to hold the teacher back either. If you've got students who can do that and want to do more, we want you to. So that, we really kind of debated it because we don't want someone to say, well, I'm only going to teach this level. And if your students are ready to go, then we want you to push beyond that. But it does at least give you a baseline that if your student can do whatever that X is, then you should feel pretty confident as a teacher that your kids have got it. And you as a principal would be able to walk in and say, okay, well, I see here's a proficiency statement for this objective. This is what you're teaching. And then it'll give you a chance to say, am I seeing what the teacher says they're seeing as well? And hopefully have a good kind of either walk through or post-conference conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
No, those are great questions. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Aiken? Dr. Aiken, I just want to congratulate your division for being a leader in science across the country, and your participation in NAEP. I actually used that some of this stuff in my graduate science course. So it is certainly comprehensive and forward thinking, and we certainly appreciate you in making the connections between home and community. It really helps those diverse learners. And on behalf of SACE, we want to extend our sincere appreciation for reaching out to the SACE for feedback before moving forward with any revisions. We certainly appreciate that. We appreciate the effort of your team, and we hope to see that data impacted. So thank you. Send thanks to your team on behalf of SACE. Thank you for joining us today.
We'll be back because math has actually started. So be prepared to hear from us to seek some ideas about math.
All right. We look forward to it. Thank you, Dr. Aiken.
Thank you, Dr. Lager. Thank you, everybody.
All right, at this time, we will continue in our agenda. I do not think that our Title VI folks are here. So we're going to move forward in our agenda with federal programs and monitoring division. In lieu of Mr. Alex Charles, we have the Melissa Edie. I hope I said that correctly. Melissa Edie with us today. So welcome, Miss Edie.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you, Dr. Locklear and Dr. Silver. I just wanted to really extend a thank you to Mr. Richardson for his informative updates today. I enjoyed hearing those, and Dr. Aiken as well. And so just kind of want to go through a couple of updates from the federal program side. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, I'm Melissa Eddy. I'm the Assistant Director in the Office of Federal Programs. Alex Charles is the Senior Director. We're going to talk a little bit today about the ESSER closeout. Of course, those are the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds. We have some updates from the federal side on applications for ESSA and then some upcoming grant opportunities. And then kind of wrap up and have next steps or any questions that we could provide or how our team could be helpful. Okay, so the overview of the ESSER program fund availability, of course, ESSER 1 has already expired. Those funds expired in September 30th of 2022. ESSER 2 funds September 30th, 2023 and have expired. And then following right behind that, currently ESSER 3 will expire September 30th, 2024. And so those funds with ESSER funding will come to an end at that period. Next slide, please. Okay, and so in this section, we'll talk about federal programming and updates. Under the ESSA plan implementation and support, we work a lot in the Office of Federal Programs with districts and charters and lab schools and helping with application processes that come available with the titles that you see under the ESSA plan, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and Title V. We work and provide those technical assistances and want to make sure that folks know that the application in what we call the CCIP state system opens June 3rd. I wanted to make note of that as well, that anyone who gets at least $40,000 in Title VI funds must consult the tribal leadership on all ESEA grants before any application is approved. So that's a part in there that our program administrators do check for. So we also are currently undergoing risk assessment in our office, and our risk assessment drives our monitoring cycle of who will be up on the monitoring cycle over the next few years. Okay, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about a new funding opportunity. This is the North Carolina Stronger Connections Grant. This grant came out of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. There are several changes in this act for mental health and school safety. So on the next slide, you will see that this grant was only available to the most distressed counties. For the North Carolina, or as we call NCSCG grant, there were 41 applications that have currently been state board approved. We in the Office of Federal Programs and Financial Business are currently under the process of getting these funds distributed across the state. And I want you to know that the funds have an encumbrance date on this one of September 30th of 2026. And next slide. Okay, so I know that was a quick update on some federal funds. Just want you to know that we're in the planning process and kind of getting ready to start our application season and do our consultations and work with districts, charter schools, lab schools, as I said, and kind of helping with those type things. And we do have, some new grants that we're getting off the ground as well, but just really appreciate being here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, or if Alex and I can send you any information, we'd be happy to as well.
Chair Lady Locklear, I do have a question. This is Olivia.
Yes, please proceed.
I have a couple questions. Thank you, Ms. Eddy, for joining us today. I learned one new thing from your presentation. I don't think I was aware of this.
Okay.
And it's very relevant to the work of SACE. The consultation requirement that you mentioned, if you would go back to that slide, because you mentioned some of the entitlement programs that must be a part of that required consultation.
Yes. Okay. Got the slide. Okay. Yeah. So any grant that received, like any district that received a Title VI grant from the U.S. Department of Education, since it's more than $40,000 of grant funds that are being received, there has to be consultative requirements for Title VI with the tribal leadership. So the ESEA grants that are listed on this slide would be where we have those discussions, and there's a place in CCIP where documentation has to be provided for the consultation before any application is approved.
Okay, so that means that consultation with a tribe or tribes would be around all of those Title I through Title V?
Well, anything like in our plan, we have a consolidated plan in CCIP, so it's overarching. So any of the ESEA grants, which include Title I, have to have that requirement in there. There have been letters that were sent out this year to those that received the Title VI grant, especially detailing this. And then our program administrators in the Office of Federal Programs, we have provided technical assistance and those kind of things on what to look for and how to make sure documentation is present.
So that means that you have been working in the past with our Title VI grants, the personnel over those grants. Is that correct?
I haven't personally, but I know Alex Charles. I've worked in coordination. I worked some of the in coordination with him with the letters and that kind of thing. But Alex has really taken some of the meetings and that kind of thing.
Okay. Maybe down in the future, Chair Lady Locklear and Dr. Silver, we could hear from Mr. Charles and his work with our Title VI projects.
Mm-hmm.
The other question, if I might, you mentioned something about 41 school districts have received those in North Carolina. I suppose it's NCSCG grants.
Mm-hmm.
Do you happen to, do you have a list handy?
I do, and I can send those to you or to Dr. Silver as well to get those to you.
I'd like to know if those grants have gone to our school districts with populations of American Indian students.
Yes, of course. I will get that to you right after the meeting.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Edie, while you're on that current slide, I see that Title VI is not included as one of the bulleted items. Just wanted some insight on that.
Yes, in our office, we look at some of the consolidated funds with that. And so it comes through a different area from our grant planning side. So this is in coordination to what we do with Title VI. So it's all encompassing and we look into it as well. But as far as some of the things we are asked to report on for the Office of Federal Programs, where we come into it is where Title VI would coordinate, to my understanding, in the ESEA grant side, holistically, the consolidation of all these grants, where Title I specifically mentions tribal leadership consultation.
If I could add a little bit of information and a little bit of historical context to that, and this may not be the complete answer, but when Indian education was established in the early 70s, I think it was 72, 73, there was some decision by Congress in the original legislation that the dollars would not flow through the state agency.
Mm-hmm.
They go directly to the school district.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be a part of the answer. It just isn't directly governed by an SEA.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, for that clarification. And that's where I kind of came into the point from Alex, where I made sure to have letters that were sent to each one of the districts or whomever would have been the Title VI grant recipient, and had that definition from U.S. Department of Ed, and then talked about how in our office, with all of our ESEA grants that are in coordination, must have that consultation with tribal leadership before any application can be approved.
Thank you.
So what does that process look like for you guys? When you say tribal consultation and meaningful collaboration with these grants, what does that process look like with your districts?
Our program administrators actually will work with the compliance, and I can send you, we have sort of like a checklist. If you'd like to look at that, it's pretty extensive with some of the things that they go through, and just make sure according to federal guidelines and the EASIE documentation that's provided from USED, but I could send you that as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Edie? Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Dorothy Yates. I just need one clarification. So we're saying that if there is a school district that receives $40,000 or more in this ESSA plan, this Title I Part A through the Title V, they should also have tribal consultation, or just the Title VI grants?
So I hope I'm providing the right clarity on this, but let's say a school district, okay? A school district is a Title VI grant recipient and they're receiving more than $40,000 of grant funds, then the consultation requirements for Title VI become a requirement for all of our ESEA grants, like you see mentioned on the slides. So the ESEA grants, which include Title I, as I said before, will not be, that documentation has to be linked to what we are doing in coordination, that we've been talking about how the tribal leadership is a valid, crucial part of what we're doing and some of the planning that we do with the federal funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just showing that connection's most important.
Yes.
Yeah, it just showing that, you know, if a district receives 40,000 or more, that that Title VI plan informs these ESSA plans. I'm not sure how that connection's laid out at this point or how districts are navigating that, but it would just be most helpful, even though that Title VI funding and those finances do not fall under your federal program, it does inform some of your federal grants. And just making that connection would be most helpful, I think, not just for SACE, but for districts.
Yes, ma'am. And that's what we're trying to do, is provide the guidance through each regional program administrator in our office. And they will take a hand-holding approach to going out to the districts this year, doing virtual meetings, whatever they need in person, and working through, you know, how does the process of consultation take part, and is it meaningful, and have things been given opportunities from federal legislation to have input? And so we want to make sure all that has been documented. And Dr. Locklear, like I said, I can provide you with what our program administrators will be helping districts, charters, that kind of thing, working towards, you know, with the compliance of making sure that this is in effect.
Let me ask another question, because Ms. Eddy, I think I've attended SACE meetings for many years, and they've all been informative. But I think what you have just shared in the last 20 minutes is the golden nugget for me. I don't think I've ever heard anything this uplifting in terms of K-12.
Well, thank you. You just gave me chills, because
the question that I have several, and maybe offline I can
let's talk
with you next week a bit more. So it sounds like there is a process that's laid out by the U.S. Department of Education to ensure that consultation takes place when a district is a recipient of Indian education dollars.
That's correct.
And therefore, the Department of Public Instruction has that set of guidelines that have to be followed. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I could also meet with you. I'd be happy to meet with you. We could set up some time. I can kind of show you the letters that went out to across the state, making sure that this is happening, and then from our office, and then how each one of our program administrators is taking that personal approach, because we want to make sure that this is evident, and we've added that into our checklist, and we want to make sure that everything is documented for tribal consultation. So yeah, I would love to talk with you more.
Yeah, better yet, if you could, maybe we could have a follow-up with you.
Yeah, and I can ask Alex too, because you asked for Alex on certain things. Let's set up both of us, because he's had his hand in some of the coordination in some of the meetings I have not been privy to. And so I'm just happy to be here today. I'm very thankful to be a part of this organization and helping do what we can do to make sure that federal funds are available, and we're doing all we can to document what is needed.
And so I would imagine that this district superintendent would have to sign off on that consultation document along with the tribal chair.
Well, there are assurances in CCIP that the superintendent, there's overarching parameters within each grant. And so at the beginning of the application season, superintendent should read through those insurances and assurances and note that some of these ESEA requirements that are in there that they're signing off on. And so that's a part that we highlight as well with our program administrators and working with our federal programs directors out in the districts. To make sure that, hey, when you're signing this, you understand that there are certain requirements that are upheld by the law.
Okay, very good.
So yeah, please.
Looking forward to learning more.
Wonderful. I'm happy to connect with you next week if you'd like to, or whenever your schedule permits.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Miss Edie, for joining Stacy today. We appreciate you. We appreciate you answering our questions and providing those most helpful insights.
Well, I'm happy to support, and if you need anything else, like I said, in follow-up, I believe I have in my notes to Dr. Oxendine get you the list of those 41 NCSG applicants as well. I'll copy Susan and Dr. Silver and Dr. Locklear on it as well so that you all have it. And then also you wanted to see what our program administrators, how that technical assistance is rolled out to make sure tribal consultation is discussed and is documented.
Very good.
Is that correct? Everything I got?
Thank
Okay.
you.
You are very welcome, and thank you again. Really heartfelt thank you for the involvement with Stacy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Too.
All right, next on our agenda, we have Title VI updates on behalf of the Office of Indian Education. We are joined by Dr. Crystal Moore. Welcome, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Locklear. Is it Dr. Locklear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I worked with a couple of Dr. Locklears throughout Carolina, so I always want to be sure. Well, thank you for having me this morning. And yeah, Crystal Moore and doctorates in education and technologies, but also with teaching history and Native American studies. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And I have also been the supervisory group leader for the Office of Indian Education Formula team. So I was definitely intrigued to hear that conversation because I love to hear what's happening on the ground in our local areas and throughout the states. We've been doing some state consolidated monitoring for different states, and I always learn a lot when I attend these meetings about how our program is actually rolling out to the states and the district. I've been the supervisor for the team for about 5 years, and forgive me if I'm a little bleary-eyed. We're in the middle of reviewing about 800 applications this week. So this is our busiest time of year, but I did want to take a little bit of time to visit with you all. I hear all the great things that are happening in North Carolina, and so wanted to make sure that we touch in with you and just make sure you're on the right track and have clear, accurate information about your program and how the statute requires things to run, as well as ed policy, and then keeping the lines of communications open between our teams. So I hear that meaningful collaboration and tribal consultation, which are two very different things in the statute and policy, are at the forefront of your minds. I think it's been ongoing at the top of your list. And so, and typically there is a fair amount of confusion throughout the states on it. So we've worked really hard across all the states, right? We grant to 38 states typically, which covers almost 500,000 students. And typically we have between 1,275 to 1,300 grants per year. One of our largest grants is actually in North Carolina. So another reason why y'all are important to us. Tribal consultation is outside of Title VI statute officially. And that's a confusing point for some folks. It is actually, if I put something in the chat, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it if you put it in the chat.
Okay, great. It's actually, tribal consultation is actually covered under ESEA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, 8538. And so we do not actually control, Title VI does not control tribal consultation. Therefore, there's no actual required reporting about tribal consultation to the Title VI program. In difference, we do control meaningful collaboration. So this document's being revised, but it's the best we have right now. It's an important document to revise. So this is, we've been revising it for over a year. And so we'll eventually have it out, but this is good enough for now. And it tells you the root statute, which is 8538. And we also have another document that we send out to our grantees and to states. It's posted on our Communities of Practice website, which is really our knowledge repository. If you ever want to see our documents, ever want to view our webinars, this is our living website here. I'm putting it in the chat. And it's easy.communities.ed.gov. It's the root of that website. The item I just put in the chat was the meaningful collaboration consultation chart. Also includes open consultation and the Indian Parent Committee approval for hallmarks of our program required by statute. Column would be B on an Excel chart, which is tribal consultation, is 8538. And it's a little bit more nuanced than just the $40,000 in award funds. So it's actually if a grant has, or a grantee, an applicant, which in our case, we have 13 different entity types, 13 different applicant types. One of them being LEAs. We have tribes, we have BIE operated, BIE tribally controlled. We have probably one of the most complex applications in all of OESE, Office of Elementary and Secondary Ed, which keeps me on my toes. So tribal consultation, if one of your LEAs received $40,000 or more in the previous year, not 2 years before, not 5 years before, not the current year, they must do tribal consultation. So previous year, so for this year would be FY23, or that would be your 23-24 school year. So the current grant that folks are spending on, if they received $40,000 or more on that award, or if you look at the statute, they had a 50% or more enrollment of American Indian Alaska Native students. So say you had an LEA that had 50% American Indian Alaska Natives enrolled in their LEA, and they would need to do tribal consultation even if they got less than $40,000. So I know there are some heavily populated American Indian Alaska Native districts in North Carolina. They would likely have received more than $40,000, so they would have triggered this already. But there are some cases like in Oklahoma, where I'm from, my family's from. They might not have received $40,000 because there's a lot of little school districts, but they did have 50% or more American Indian students. So they would still have to do tribal consultation. Okay. And Ms. Eddy was right. It does include all these title programs. So with it, it does not require the superintendent to sign off on the tribal consultation of the grantee or the applicant. It's an affirmation. The statute says, quote, affirmation that tribes met with or consulted with. It's an official consultation, which has a lot of specifics to it. So the tribal leader, delegates, representative, official representative would have signed that affirmation. And the SEA is to keep that on file. So I think at one point you all were working on hiring a director, executive director of Indian Ed at the state. I don't know where that's at right now, but typically that person would be the one to collect those affirmations. And the state can be involved, the SEA can be involved otherwise, like in the actual tribal consultation and helping schedule. And some of our states do. Some of the time they don't. They leave it to the LEAs and they just collect the affirmation forms. So because some of our states have almost no structure at the state level to provide that sort of extra support for the actual consultation. So they leave that up to the LEAs. However you do that, it's up to you, as long as you do collect those affirmations that any affected programs, as you'll see in column A, row 2, column B, row 2, it says 8538 affects the following title programs. So they, if you receive any of those titles, then they would need to be part of that consultation and that affirmation. Okay. So I think I'll stop there. Any questions about that before I go on to meaningful collaboration?
I do have a question. This is
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.
Today. Hi. I want to know, I'll go back to the affirmation piece. Is there any reason why the district superintendent's signature is not required? Seems like that would be another accountability check.
It's not in the statute. So we only require what's in the statute. And we do not currently, we may in the future, provide the affirmation template that is usually drafted either by the LEA and or the SEA, but it's never been provided by the Office of Indian Education or the U.S. Department of Education. And we were founded in 1972. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary 2 years ago. So in the 52 years now, we've never provided it. And yeah, the statute doesn't require a signature from the superintendent, so we don't either.
So let me make sure I understand this. So the Department of Public Instruction through federal programs would only be concerned for their purposes to satisfy USDOE, those school districts that receive the 40,000 plus. The 50% enrollment would not be of any real concern to Department of Public Instruction. Their requirement is a minimum of $40,000 in IEA funds. Is that correct?
It's an or.
Yes.
Or.
Yeah, an or an and. I mean, if they trigger both, the 50% or more plus the 40K or more in the previous year, then it would be required for tribal consultation. But as written, it's an or. So yeah, and it's in the middle of that chart you see on the screen.
I'm not looking at it very carefully. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's 50% or more, or who receive 40,000 in Title VI. So those ors and ands gets us a lot, but yeah, in this case, it's an or, either one of those items.
Would you know off the top, this is probably an unfair question, but I'd like to know, I know Robeson County is a large project, and probably the Eastern Band of Cherokee, but what about our other, we've got what, 5 or maybe up to 10 other districts that receive Title VI funds, I'm not sure. I'd like to know their amounts.
Yeah, and this is the perfect year to ask that, and I think it's Dr. Oxendine.
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Oxendine.
Yeah, perfect time to ask this. For the first time ever, because I'm a data person, and first time ever, we've published that actual data on our website. So let me just put that in so what we've published, we've redacted all personally identifiable information per federal requirement, but we've published all award amounts, Indian student counts, objectives. So basically what kind of programs, services, and objectives, what activities they'll be doing for all of our grantees. FY23, we're in the middle of FY24 reviews, as I stated at the beginning. So FY24 data will probably be available September. But I just put FY23 data. So you can look at all of your applicants, including tribes, if you can't think off the top of my head, if you have straight tribal applicants in North Carolina. But all of your applicants, grantees, you can find on that spreadsheet.
All right, thank you so much. That's so helpful.
Yeah, the only thing that's missing, and that's just to protect that PII. We've redacted contact information, but other than that, all the data's there.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? We're also going to publish APR data too. We've had a request for that, and we're, I think, almost finished redacting that. So the APR is the annual performance report. And basically all of our grantees are required by statute to tell us their results from the grant. And so that's also interesting to look at. And we'll publish a similar spreadsheet for that as well for you all. So anything else on tribal consultation or award information? And Dr. Locklear, can you keep track of time for us? Just kind of maybe give me a 5 or 2 minute warning.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then, so back to meaningful collaboration. Let me real quick, actually. Oh, did that link come through to the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, great. It also, there's a map of the distribution of our grants as well on that. We try to keep that award page updated. Yeah, that's the spreadsheet. Great. Okay. Meaningful collaboration, tribal consultation. So tribal consultation, if you trigger those items, you must do it. And so not everybody has to do it. And often Title VI won't ever hear about it unless there's a problem. Right? Unless there's a complaint that somebody is not actually doing tribal consultation, either covering Title VI or covering the other title programs that are affected, we only get involved if we hear, basically, if we have a complaint, since it's outside of our authority, really. And meaningful and ongoing collaboration, 100% within our authority. We always review for this. It basically says that all LEAs and BIE applicants, which would include tribally controlled and or bureau operated. So 2 types of BIE schools, they must meaningfully collaborate with Indian tribes located in the community that have at least 1 student enrolled in their LEA or their school, their grant covered program. We do get some confusion about that because maybe a tribe is, and we have interpreted in the community to be 50 miles or less. There's some reference in the statute about 50 miles being the proximity limit. And so if it's 51 miles or 55 miles, do they have to meaningfully collaborate? We statutorily cannot require it. However, we highly recommend they do, just for community relations purposes. And you see the statute there on the screen at the bottom of column C, row 2, ESEA 6114. B7 is where that statute is, which makes us do this. And we say that the LEAs or the grantees applicants must meet with an official representative of the tribe that has some sort of official delegation on file. They can't say, I couldn't say, hey, I'm Crystal, I'm a tribal member, I'm going to officially meet with the LEA to count for their meaningful collaboration. I must have an official delegation from my tribal leadership, giving me the authority to serve as that delegate, as that representative for the meaningful collaboration. There should be at least 1 meeting to discuss the program, services and activities, budget, that sort of thing, anything included in the application. And then there's a description put in of that in your application. So we do review for that. And we routinely send back applications for modifications, more clarification. If we find out that the meaningful collaboration did not happen, we will cause repayment. We will require repayment of the award. So we take that very seriously. And if a tribe is located within 50 miles, but does not have any students enrolled in the program, which happens, then they are not technically legally required to collaborate with that tribe. However, we've had this question, I've had this question numerous times, and I always tell everybody it's not required. However, it's recommended that you do, because you don't know at what point they'll have a student enrolled. They also have a cultural history legacy in the area, and just to respect the culture you're working with or working within or surrounding you, we highly recommend you do. We've not really had a problem with this, but there's been the question, just for technicalities, if nothing else. So, any questions about that? Meaningful collaboration.
I do have a not so much well, it is a question. This is Olivia Oxendine again. Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples, like scenarios of tribes and LEAs in meaningful consultation that really cover some of the nuances around the required distance and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Like situations.
I'm trying to think. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to provide. I'm just wondering if you could send something in print, some scenario examples and situations. Sometimes they work. They're very helpful in wrapping heads around, or my head around, all the details.
Yeah, we don't currently have anything in print. I mean, we are updating that tribal consultation. We have a plethora of materials. I can give you a couple of quick examples.
Yeah.
Just for your purposes. I had a grantee in California. There was a tribe that had no official recognition, state or federal, which is required by our program statutorily. And so the tribal leader may not have had the most positive relationship with the school district. So they were really questioning, do I need to meaningful collaborate with this tribe who's not recognized? And after we confirmed they didn't have official recognition, which I have my personal feelings about that, but statutorily and legally, if they're not federal or state recognized, then it's not required. So we worked through that with them and ultimately said what I said earlier: you're not required to, and I confirmed this with our attorneys, you're not required to meet with them legally. However, we recommend you do for the benefit of the students that are here. They routinely have students cycle in and out of the school district, so at some point you will have to. And so the key difference is recommended versus required. So if they don't have, that's the case, they didn't have recognition, then there's been the other case where they currently had no students enrolled. And that's part of the requirement, is that they must have the tribe must have at least one student enrolled in order for the district to be required to meet with them. And again, we say, well, it's not required. However, we highly recommend you do. So, and most of the time they work through it. They're just wanting to know the rules at the base, at the foundation. And then once they know the rules, they typically will work through it and have a conversation. The school district isn't required to take the advice or act on the advice given by the tribe. We hope they will. And I would say most, if not all the cases I've had, they really are trying to. But there's no legal requirement. So I just want to be clear about what they should and what they could and what they often do versus what's legally required. Okay. Did that help? Did you have any other specifics?
Thank you very much. That was helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. If you're thinking of anything specific in North Carolina or one of your areas or tribal situations, happy to answer that too. Okay. While I'm here. Yeah. Yeah, most of the time these go well. I mean, we don't get too many complaints about meaningful collaboration. Sometimes probably the biggest complaint we have from our applicants is that the school district, the applicant will reach out to the tribe, and then the tribe just is too busy, especially during this COVID time. They're dealing with all the extra benefit of funding, but it's still a lot of work to deal with a lot of extra funding. And so they were inundated with tribal consultation requests. So our tribes weren't as responsive as normal during that COVID time. It's getting better, but that was the biggest complaint is we've tried and they haven't responded. So we tell everybody, you just need to do a good faith effort, due diligence efforts, do your outreach, document your outreach efforts, tell us, give us that documentation, who you tried to talk to, who you called and didn't return your phone call, that sort of thing, demonstrate a good faith effort. And then we will not hold up an application for this if somebody made a good faith effort and just didn't get a response. If they didn't do due diligence, we will reject an application for this. So, okay. Anything else on meaningful collaboration? No? Okay. How are we doing with time, Dr. Locklear?
We're good.
Okay. Anybody have questions about open consultation or Indian Parent Committee? I would say probably the vast majority of questions, complaints, consternations I get is from Indian Parent Committee processes and questions about the law and what's required and what's not. Do we want to talk about that? Anybody know? Okay, I'll do a high level. Maybe I'll tell you what I often hear and have to clarify. Just to get your attention, I'll say we must reject any application that does not have approval of the Indian Parent Committee on the final, keyword final application. So after you all have met at least once, had one conversation, it can be virtual, it can be in person, it could be hybrid, a little bit of both. It could even be via email, right? There has to be some sort of conversation and review of that final application. Not this is what the school district is proposing, or this is what the IPC is proposing. It's the final application. You've made all your deliberations, come to all your agreements, worked through the budget. Every piece of that application is final after that's been approved by the Indian Parent Committee. And this is the power of the Indian Parent Committee. The Indian Parent Committee chair must sign that form, and it must be provided to us with your final application. This year, we've received blank forms. We've received forms that have not been signed by the chair. We've received forms that only had one parent and one teacher under column C. And that's not 51%, right? So the other key requirement is parents, and it doesn't have to be just parents anymore. The ESSA amendment allowed for family members too. So it could be an uncle, a grandparent, it can be a family member, and it can also be a foster parent or adoptive parent. But anybody serving as parent in column A must have a child, a student, with a valid 8506 form on file in the program. So they must be a vetted member of the Indian Education Program via the 8506. And the family member must represent at least one of those. And then you must have a committee of at least 3. Our lawyers have determined that a committee is 3, not 2. And 2 of those 3 must be family members or parents in column A. And then the chairperson must also be listed in column A. So they must be, we've had some an applicant submit an application with a project director as the chairperson, and we've had to reject it. So a school employee cannot serve as the Indian Parent Committee chair. as one of the reasons is conflict of interest, but there's several others. So we must have a valid and complete Indian Parent Committee form uploaded with your final application in order to approve the application. And we review every application 100% for these IPC forms. And it looks like we're going to have to reject at least 4 or 5 applications this year of all different dollar amounts. Well, and one's well over $100,000 because we do not have an Indian Parent Committee approval form. We give a plethora of technical assistance, webinars, phone calls. I make a lot of direct phone calls myself. Everybody, and the statute's been since, the ESSA has been since 2015, and prior to that, since 1972. So every opportunity to get this right. And so it's really unfortunate. One of the least favorite things of ours to do, worst things of ours to do, is to have to reject because we did not get a valid Indian Parent Committee form. We've had a few applications, I'll say, and this is that they said, well, we tried, we can't get the Indian Parent Committee members to join or show up. And I've told them, making it as flexible as possible. They don't have to be located in your local community. They can be a family member that moved 500 miles away, get them on the phone. Send them the file via email, via mail, have them review the final application that way. But the statute is very clear. We must have an Indian Parent Committee with 51% of family, and they must review and approve the final application. And so we don't like having to reject those applications, and we wish we had 0 of those. But unfortunately, we seem to have a handful every year at least. We've had a couple applicants that have felt pressured. They didn't have the committee, and so they did some maneuvering right before the application was due. We got some complaints about that. I had to follow up, and it turned out to not be a valid and complete IPC form, so the grantee had to repay 100% of the fines. One was over $150,000. So we do follow up on everything, and we do take these Indian Parent Committees are the hallmark of our program. They are unique to Title VI Part A, and they're really important to us. So I can't tell you how many meetings I've shown up at and talked with superintendents and Indian Parent Committees and interviewed folks to see what really happened. Were the Indian Parent Committees respected as they were supposed to be according to the statute? And if they're not, we will do what we are required to do with the support of our legal team. So I think that covers it. We did add to this chart. This was revised a couple of years ago, and we had a lot of questions like, when should I do tribal consultation, or when should I do Indian Parent Committee meetings, and that sort of thing. So we added in parentheses at kind of the end of each cell or row suggested timelines. Like for Indian Parent Committee, you would typically have that final meeting preferably by mid-April. Certainly whenever you have your final application ready, but our application typically closes in mid-May, sometimes give or take a few days, but it's best to make sure. We have some applicants that wait to the very end to do Indian Parent Committee meetings, and then the Indian Parent Committee doesn't agree with the final application. They don't like the budget. They want different activities. They want more language classes, less field trips. I don't know. We hear a whole plethora. Less personnel, more supplies, that sort of thing. And so we just say you just need to agree. So if you wait until the last minute to have an Indian Parent Committee and people aren't in agreement, you're not likely to get a final application approved by them. That happened in one of my California districts. 2 years ago. So, okay, I'll stop. It's a lot of talking, so I'll stop. Anybody?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Are there any questions from the SACE? Thank you, Dr. Moore. We always appreciate you coming and bringing us those most informative updates. We appreciate your time. If we have any follow-up, we'll be sure to send you an email. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope you all have a great day and weekend.
Thank you, you as well.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, next on our agenda, we have our very own Dr. Olivia Oxenine bringing us updates from the North Carolina State Board of Education. Welcome, Dr. Oxenine. You're on mute.
Well, that might help if I get off mute.
Thank you.
Yes, I bet I'm very close to your lunchtime, right? If so, I'm going to speed it up. I want to say to you, though, I didn't mind Dr. Moore cutting into my time because her information was extremely important. I'm telling you, I took a lot of notes, and I'll have to go back and sort them out and maybe get with Dr. Locklear and Dr. Silver to kind of flesh things out, but that was most important. My presentation is going to be rather quick today. I have several slides, and you have the PowerPoint. You can go through the PowerPoint at your leisure, but I'm going to just hit the highlights of the highlights to save time. You have what I have on this particular slide is the committees of the State Board of Education. I have shared these with you in the past, but this gives you a quick thumbnail of how the State Board of Education is organized by committees. I can go to, you can go to the next. The next slide is going to be kind of the heart of my presentation. The highlights will come from what was discussed out of the Educator Standards and Practices, known as the ES&P Subcommittee of the State Board, and that is the committee that I chair. So this report is the annual report on the state of the teaching profession. And this gives a lot of data on the number of teachers who have left the school, have left the profession, the numbers of teachers who have changed jobs within the district. So it's just some basic information that is required in general statute. Annual report to the General Assembly. The Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee requires this report on an annual basis. There are two terms that are very important to this report. There's the term attrition and the term mobility. Attrition means actually leaving the profession, and then mobility means moving, changing jobs within the district or changing jobs, leaving one county, going to another. And there are also 5 categories under which data are collected. And we can go to the next slide, thank you. This is kind of an overview. This is an important frame, especially I find it very informative because it lets us know the various pathways for becoming a teacher in North Carolina. So you have data on the traditional route, the alternative or the residency route, those teachers who are coming to us from out of state, the teachers who are coming to us through the CTE pathway, your international pathway. Normally that is the visiting international faculty program, and then a category called other. So I've got 2 of those columns highlighted and highlighted for a specific reason. If you see that the alternative or the residency route, you see that it's growing. So many of our teachers are coming to the profession with a 4-year degree, but not with a teaching degree. Therefore, they have to be, they're employed, but they have to be affiliated with an EPP in order to earn their teaching, take a variety of courses and earn their teaching license. So yes, if you've heard there's a shortage in North Carolina, More or less that's true. There are shortages definitely in specific fields such as EC, mathematics, and the sciences. And so we're having to rely on the alternative or the residency route. It's amazing how that has increased compared to the traditional route over time. So we'll go to the next frame. And here again are those two definitions, very important definitions to this report. It is the attrition, the reduction in the number that occurs when employees leave an employing unit. Attrition can be measured at the state or LEA level. Also included in the attrition rate are those teachers who retire during the year. One of the questions that I've raised several times since I've been on the board is to pull out the number of teachers, educators who retire and let that be a separate column by itself, because, you know, retirement is something that an individual has made up their mind. They're not necessarily leaving because of working conditions, or they've just had it with the profession. They're leaving for a very definite reason. I don't even call it, in a way, attrition, but for the state, for the purposes of this state report, it is considered rolled into attrition. Then your mobility, this is a relocation from one LEA or a charter to another within North Carolina. This report, mobility exists is measured at the state level as well as at the LEA level. And then we'll go to the next slide. This is totally out of order. I apologize. This should have been early in the presentation. I don't know why it's out. But at our last state board meeting, members of SACE, Dr. Tiffany Locklear presented the report, the SACE report. So that is an annual report that's given by the chair of SACE at state board. So she presented the most current report, and you see that this annual report is required in GS 115C 210. Dr. Locklear did a really good job going through the data, highlighting where we need to go next. We still have gaps in the achievement of our students. And one of the main reasons that we've worked hard to get this position established is so that individual, whoever becomes that person, can focus on ways to mitigate and hopefully, if at all possible, may not be possible in my lifetime, but to at least see a shrinkage of that gap. So thanks to Dr. Locklear for coming forward and carrying out that responsibility that's required in state law. So we'll go to the next frame, and that is still about the state of the teaching report. This goes into a little bit of information, not of significant importance to SACE, but it's the technical side of when the data on mobility and attrition are collected during the year. We'll go on to the next slide. So a little bit about teachers who hold an emergency license. Let's say you do have a classroom teacher with an emergency license or a permit to teach, and that individual has been hired by the district to fill or to go into the classroom and serve as a science teacher. The school system cannot count that position as that. In other words, the school system must continue to count that position, even though there is a teacher in that classroom supervising and educating students. That is still considered a vacancy for official reporting purposes. A rehired retiree, and we have probably a growing number of retired educators returning to the classroom to fill some of the shortages, but that retiree is still not satisfying filling a position officially. That position is still left open as vacant. The same thing applies to long-term subs or any unlicensed teacher. The next frame goes into key terms, which I've highlighted just a minute ago. What is an open position? Focuses on the number of positions without an adult supervising and teaching in the classroom. Once filled, that position then is no longer, that means filled with a licensed educator with the valid credentials so far as the State Board of Education is concerned. So we'll go over to the permanent position. the permanent position is defined as focuses on having a fully qualified educator in a permanent position. Rehired retirees, once again, regardless of the licensure status, will not satisfy that permanent position. Then we'll go over to the next frame. The next frame is looking at going back to 17, 18, looking at the kind of the raw data, the core data that's important to this report. You can see the first column gives you numbers and percentages for the state attrition number and then the rate. I want you to pay attention to the between 2017-18 and go down to 2022-23. That is the most, that time frame is the most current window that we have for collecting this data. It is amazing. As a matter of fact, it struck me again as I was getting ready to send this material on for this meeting. Look at the difference from 2017-18 to 2022-23. It's amazing. We're from 7,600 to over 10,000 leaving the profession or leaving the district going elsewhere. Then you see the attrition rate. Then if you look at the next column, the new hires as of September of the following school year, when the data are collected, you see that column. And if you look at the next column is quite interesting to me because what it does, it's called a replenishment rate, but another way of thinking about it is the recovery or the recoupment rate. That simply means the extent to which the school system was able to find sufficient numbers of teachers. And I want to believe this is teachers with valid credentials, not just teachers supervising students without a license. But the recoupment, replenishment, or the recovery rate is actually a little bit impressive. However, you see a decline in that rate from 17-18 down to 2022-23. And then you have the overall state vacancy rate is the last column. And it is high. And that the vacancy rate, though, there again, it's not those holding a permit to teach or emergency license, but it's that person who has that valid license and is filling a permanent position. So from 1.5 to down to 6.4%. Then we'll go on to the next the next frame. This is an interesting frame because it looks at attrition rate according to longevity. From the beginning of career year one, the rate of attrition according to years of service. So you see a spike during the first the first 2 years, definitely the first year. And that spike begins to level off, go downward, kind of level off during the period of time of, I suppose, the mid-career. And the teacher or teachers are well into their career. Things are going reasonably well. Maybe they've been promoted from teacher to an instructional coach or on into the school administration. And you see another spike toward the latter part of the longevity period. And this is where you would see captured a lot of retirees. So when this report was presented to us last month, one of the recommendations was we still need to come up with ways to support that the early career beginning teacher, and perhaps through some policy changes at the state board level, we can begin to address that. You know, what causes that first year, second year, third year teacher decide this isn't for me? And some of the reasons fall into three categories: lack of mentoring support. Let's say the teacher has an unrealistic workload. It's a first-year teacher and has an assigned homeroom or assigned instructor of record of 50% of students that are low performing and discipline problems. So it becomes overbearing for the first-year teacher. Or teachers that decide over time, first 3 years, I just don't have the skills. I'm not willing to go back for professional development or additional courses to develop the skill set. And sometimes the individual just decides that I'm not right for the profession. So it's a misalignment between the personal goals of the individual and the career goals. This is a very good chart. It just it brings forth lots of questions about the profession in general of teaching. And then we'll go on to the next frame. I'm trying to get you through to your launch. The teacher attrition rate, this is a summary of the summary of findings. The rate has increased this year to 11.5, which is double digits and has the attention of everyone. Public school units have been able to, the good thing is they've been able to recoup or recover and hire teachers at a rate that exceeds the attrition rate. That's a good thing. That's a good part. That's the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. But there's a lot of work going on in an HR office to go out and recruit. And helping in that vein would certainly be principals and assistant principals and counselors and others to go out and find these teachers. And then the teacher attrition rate is not uniform across years of experience, and you saw that in the longevity frame. And then the last summary is how teachers enter the profession in terms of a license pathway has certainly shifted over the years. If you think back to one of the early frames where the residency pathway seems to be as becoming somewhat the traditional pathway to enter the field of teaching. And I believe that should conclude my update from the State Board of Education. Oh, these are just policy implications. Again, this report always generates discussions around policies. And these are three highlights. The data suggests that early career teachers are not being supported sufficiently or in the most helpful ways. So that begs the question for mentors or mentoring teens or some way we're going to have to find, be creative around how to encourage that first 5-year teacher to stay in the field. Policies related to beginning teacher support were developed at a time when it was the traditional route. Now it's not the traditional route. So PD, differentiated support, more intense support, more frequent support for those who are entering the field that have, let's say, a 4-year degree in biology, but when they were getting that degree, they were not interested in teaching. Now they're teachers. We've got to help them understand what it means to be a teacher. And through policy, perhaps through policy, we can begin to address those deficiencies. And so again, here is the Department of Public Instruction made a rather clear suggestion, policy suggestion to the State Board of Education around the beginning teacher support program and ways to strengthen that program. So I've been rather quick with this presentation. Does anyone have questions?
Chairwoman Locklear, I have a question.
Please proceed.
Hey, Dr. Arsenan, it's Jeremiah.
Hi, Jeremiah.
So I'm just curious to know, why was the lateral entry pathway replaced with the residency model? Like, is there any reasoning behind that? Because I know there was a clear shift, and now they have to be connected to like a university, and I think you referred to it was an EPP program, like an educator preparedness program. Why was lateral entry done away with and replaced with the residency model? Was there a reasoning behind that, or?
Well, that's a very good question. That goes back to maybe about 6 years ago. There was it's either a Senate bill or House Bill 599, brought about a lot of changes in the preparation of teachers. And the lateral entry, I'm just going to give you a plain answer.
Yeah.
I just think it had reached its point of termination. It wasn't a bad model at all. As a matter of fact, we still have teachers in that pipeline, even though the lateral entry model ended, I think it was in 2021 officially, but we still had teachers in that pipeline, and we're just at the very end of getting them through that lateral entry. They could have switched over to residency, but many chose not to. And there was a lot of thought around that. I think some of it was we needed, the State Board of Education and the General Assembly needed to be sure that those who are entering the pipeline were, number one, employed, but also affiliated with an approved EPP.
That makes sense.
So it really had more to do with the EPP piece, the teacher education program piece was, I believe, was the focus of that piece of legislation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you so much. On behalf of the State Board, we appreciate each of you and the time you give to good discussions around the achievement of our American Indian students in North Carolina. State Board of Education's very happy that we have this position in place. And they're looking for, you know, in the future, just good information, positive information about the impact of that position. North Carolina's on the map with that position. Thank you, Chair Lady Locklear.
Thank you, Dr. Oxenine. I was just about to mention that you didn't provide the American Indian Director position as an update, and look at you being great.
That feels like, you talk about teamwork.
Absolutely, absolutely. Much progress for the SACE.
You know, I didn't say anything because I thought maybe it had already been discussed. But I will say to SACE, it was an arduous process. And I've learned one thing about the length of time that it took. Seems to be the rule of thumb for all positions that come to the Department of Public Instruction. It's amazing that they even employ anyone, because it just has taken a long time. One of the reasons that I was given, I suppose over the last couple of weeks, when I say we, there have been several of us just pushing and pushing this. And I think one of the reasons I learned from Superintendent Truitt is that the position, when it was first sent over to state personnel, it was sent over not at the director salary level. It was written not at the, now let me say something about a director. Director doesn't mean that you supervise anyone. In most cases, a director does. But the classification system for positions in the Department of Public Instruction are a little bit misleading. So it's called a director's position because it's paid at a Director 1 level. So in time, depends on how, you know, how this job rolls out, how it develops over time. When I say that, it could be whoever is the person who wears this hat. This person is going to spend probably a year developing the pieces of this position as stated in the job description. So it may take a year, it may take 2 years to get a full-blown program. This is an exciting position, an exciting opportunity, because whoever is the person that fills this position is going to have not to the sky flexibility, but quite a bit of leeway in designing it around the parameters of the job description. So I say all that to say some of the delay had to do with starting over with the position itself and rewriting it so that it was written not at a, I don't know, it might have been written at a coordinator's level, I'm not sure, but it did take some time to start over with it to get it at the right level. So the next step is it's going to be open for several days. I have no idea about the flow of applicants. And then the next step is to go into the interview process. And I won't even attempt to give you when will this person be onboarded. That means showing up to do the job, going through the orientation that DPI requires, filling out a lot of forms, employment forms. I'm not even going to speculate when that will be, but it certainly, we hope it's now May. We hope this person is good to go sometime, I would say early August. And that may be, that is purely a guess.
Thank you, Oxenine, for that update. Thank you for joining Stacey as always. Thank you for all your advocacy as we continue to help improve the educational standard.
Absolutely. I do want to say to SACE members, please talk up this position in your communities. let folks know about it. And I'm sure that Dr. Silver, Dr. Locklear, you can give them information on where to find the site of the position on the DPI website. So really talk it up. If you know any individuals who have a strong background in education, the classroom, knowledge of Indian education, please encourage them to apply for the position.
Thank you, Dr. Oxenine.
Thank you, all of you. Again, thanks for everything and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, you too. As I know, Dr. Silver sent us the direct link to that American Indian Director position. She sent it to all SACE members. So as Dr. Oxenine stated, please share with your network. We will move to our last agenda item, which is our 2025 SACE Summit. We just wanted to discuss some ideas for that summit, potentially nail down a date so that we could reserve a space. Are there any ideas as it relates to the SACE Summit? So the SACE Summit is held biannually, and it's an all-day session for anyone that hasn't attended. It's an all-day session where we concentrate on different topics as it relates to American Indian education. We had a great SACE session in 2023. That's when we first began talking about that American Indian Director position. So here we are at 2025. Are there any ideas that you would like to share as it relates to the summit?
Dr. Locklear, I have a question.
Yes.
Well, and a comment as well. Kind of for the summit, talking about collaboration and stuff with the different entities. But I had a comment for Dr. Oxenine. I didn't want to interrupt anybody, but I just wanted to let everybody know that through my work with North Carolina Public Schools and the Bureau of Indian Education Schools and with Indian education in general, and especially the work through SACE that we have done, that I accepted an invitation to join the National Indian Education Study Technical Review Panel. My work started last month, and that I'm excited to represent the Southeast region on that national level. So I'm hoping that we can bring some of our input and be a stakeholder in that process. So.
Thank you and congratulations.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
We look forward to the collaboration.
Dr. Locklear, this is Greg Richardson again, back with you.
Yes, sir.
And just appreciating all the dialogue and information that's flowing here. Just wanted to offer support to the summit on the part of the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs in any way that we can help facilitate the summit. We're happy to do that. And we're hopeful that we're going to be gearing up a youth leadership program, get that funding from the General Assembly that will provide some financial resources for those kinds of things. So as you know, we have some programming staff and staff here rather. We have the workforce program, and we always want to make sure that educators are familiar with what that program is all about, so that once the students are graduating from school, they can take advantage of the workforce program training opportunities and scholarship that we provide. So just wanted to mention that before you adjourned.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Dr. Locklear, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How is the location usually determined?
We decide as a committee. And we just think about what resources, as Mr. Craig said, we have to be, we don't have lots of funds to support, to support the summit. So just looking at partnering as it relates to a location. Last year, we did it in Pinehurst at Whispering Pines. a couple years ago. Before that, we did it at a school. I can't remember the name of the school. But finances is part of our venue decision. I would like to state, when we were looking in 2023, just at the last minute, I reached out to Campbell University, Dr. Alfred Bryant, and he was very willing to support us having the SACE Summit at Campbell University. So it may be a potential location. I would imagine, or I mean, we could negotiate with him about the facility just hosting us in some way and see what financial support that he could provide. I know he does a lot of things on behalf of American Indians at Campbell University, so that may be one venue that we can think about.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any other venue suggestions?
Dr. Locklear, let me just add a point to the Campbell University idea. That I like that idea. I mean, I don't have a voice in this, but I will just say that it's really good to have, to have the universities exposed to SACE, the work of SACE. It's a very good very good partnership to build with universities.
Thank you, Dr. Otsenine. Are there any others with a venue in mind? Just in case Campbell can't host us, a potential backup.
Dr. Locklear, I don't have another venue in mind, but I have a statement.
Sure.
So I was thinking about like the communities that actually receive like the Indian Ed funding. Is there an intentionality about shifting the summit, meaning like we're going to be in this particular community one year, then the next summit we're in a different community? Like, because I would say just the previous summit, like that would be close to Lumbee territory and a few others in terms of how far we had to drive or get there. Is there an intentionality about being in the separate communities within the state to show like we care about all of our tribal communities? Does that make sense? Like we're going to
absolutely.
This community? Okay.
So previously, I know we've tried to find a central location, but that's a great idea that SACE could certainly consider. Okay, so we'll continue. If you guys think of any additional location or venue, please let us know. Send an email and we can follow up with that. I think one of the most important things is all of us getting it on our calendars. If we could select a, I hate to say tentative date, but really try to hone down on a concrete date for that summit would be great today. So it's typically held in January.
Dr. Locklear, was it held on Friday last time? Was it a Friday?
Yes, sir.
Week.
Dr. Locklear, this is Angelique, and I think we had it, the fourth Friday of January? Is that right? Somewhere around the 26th, 27th, that date sticks out to me. We can go with that, like the fourth Friday of that month.
Okay. So that would be January the 24th of 2025. Does anyone have any objections to that date?
Hey, Dr. Locklear, this is Stephen.
Hi.
One thought, I was just looking at our school calendar. That's the very end of our quarter two. I mean, I'm not a classroom teacher, so it's not going to affect me, but I don't know if that will impact educators or principals from being able to attend that. I don't know if everyone is on like a similar schedule, but if that's a concern, I think the 31st could also be another option too.
Okay. So we can move forward with those dates. The venue might also inform which date that we select. But of course, we always like Stacey presence at this. Is there any objections to either one of these dates? Okay, we will move forward with looking for spaces and seeing what we can do to move forward. Thank you all. Dr. Silver, is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation today before we adjourn?
Thank you, Chairwoman Locklear. Yes, just a few things. So the first thing I'll add is that the 2024 safety report was approved by the state board at their last monthly meeting. There is a link to it in this agenda. You can feel free to start sharing those as you're ready. We will be adding it to the website once we get an opportunity to do those website updates. The other thing I would share is, again, congratulations on the position. I echo everyone's sentiment. I want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Oxendine, of course, Representative Lowry, and Chairwoman Locklear. It has been a arduous journey, I think is the word you used, Dr. Oxendine, but some of that is par for the course here. That is true. The other thing I would share is that I am going to work with Dr. Mullinex. She was not able to make this meeting to work on interview questions, and we're still having discussion about that interview committee. So I'll be working closely with her. The next step, Dr. Oxendine said she wasn't sure, so I'll just share some of the next steps. Once applications close out, it goes to HR for an initial screening, and we have what we call a SME, which is a subject matter expert. I'm hoping to work with Dr. Mullinex again to identify that person. But quite frankly, I'm hoping it'll be Ms. Richardson who'll be able to go through those as the first round. So it goes through one round. How long that takes totally depends on how many applicants you get. I've had positions where I've had 200 applicants come through. So it really depends. The other thing I would say for anybody who's listening, who's interested in applying, if you don't put some of the exact terminology from the posting, your application will get screened out. So make sure that you are using the language that's in the application there and that you're listing all your years of experience. Otherwise, again, when it's time to create salaries, they'll go, oh, you didn't do this for 20 years because it's not there. So it goes to the SME, they pass that back to HR, HR does another check, and then it finally goes to the hiring manager who then gets to screen down. So let's say there are 200 applicants, the SME puts through 20, the hiring manager can then decide, I'm going to interview these 5. So it has to go through yet another layer. Then the interview team is convened. They hold interviews and make their decisions. And then we start with notifying the person, getting references. Now, this is where, as Dr. Oxendine says, it's totally unpredictable because then, let's say the person says yes, we get applications, then it has to go to State Office of Personnel for a salary to be set. So all of that kind of goes back and forth. I think August is probably, fingers crossed, a good bet for that to happen. So just kind of making you aware of all the steps. So say I've talked about report, talked about position, hopefully working with Dr. Mullinex. I will give some insight into the summit. So last year we did pay for the space. Other times we've tried to get free spaces. I wanted to get this on the agenda today because obviously the earlier you start, it's easier to get nicer free spaces. If SAFE opts to pay for space, that certainly can come out of the safety budget. Just know it's going to take about half of it, which is fine. That just means, maybe doing more virtual meetings or maybe just thinking around travel and things like that. It just requires cutting from some other areas. We were able to manage that last time, so those are all options. Appreciate giving us some parameters to work around early on and getting that done, but I will create that shared document for people to start contributing ideas. I posted that in the chat, and I believe people are responsive to that. I think that's it. Anything else you need to know from me, Dr. Locklear, Dr. Oxendine, or any other SACE members?
I just want to correct something I said about August as far as the time that person will show up getting ready to do the work. I meant August of 2027. This is incredible.
Let's hope not.
You know what? I will say this: whoever is that person named in that position, and you can agree or with me or not, Dr. Silver. It's going to take a lot of working in a state bureaucracy requires a lot of patience.
Yes. Yes. But all worth it in the end.
Always worth it.
Yeah, we just manage our expectations, that's all. And also I'd recommend, Dr. Locklear, at some point, having maybe a work session, it could be virtual, to discuss, how we do manage expectations around this position and kind of how DPI currently operates and how we help that person make that transition into that space. And just kind of all those kind of weird, quirky things about DPI that nobody really knows.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Silver. Dr. Silver, I think I saw in the chat where you said that you would start a brainstorming Google document for us as it relates to the Education Summit.
Yeah, I said I can create one. I can do that.
Okay, thank you. So we can begin to generate some discussion and make some decisions so that we can go ahead and begin to find a location for us. All right, are there any other questions at this time?
Dr. Locklear, this is Dorothy Yates. I don't have a question, but I do have an announcement that I would like to make.
Yes.
The American Indian Fund Scholarship, which is funded by the American Indian License Plates, the committee has met and has awarded the scholarships for this year. There were 38 applicants. 12 of those were returning applicants because you can receive this scholarship, $1,000 for 4 years. And we had 26 new applicants. We only had funds to award 26 of these applicants, and the 12 returning applicants were funded, and 14 new applicants were funded for a total of 26 awards. And I can send you a flyer on this that gives a breakdown on our American Indian communities that receive the scholarship. And I also wanted to put a plug in that our American Indian license plates right now is the only funding source for this scholarship. So and that amount has been decreasing. So we may want to have some conversation within our Indian communities to see if we can receive some other entities that would like to contribute to this American Indian Scholarship Fund. But thank you. I just wanted to announce that. So we had excellent applicants and we wish we could have awarded more, but the funds were limited to the $26,000 for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy. Any other updates from any of our SACE members? Steve, Mr. Bill, I see your question. Typically, we have about 200 people, and we need like 3 to 4 breakout rooms, and we always provide lunch. So, the space potentially having catering or there being catering nearby is always a benefit. So if that helps as you begin thinking about any other location options, I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Locklear.
All right, thank you all for spending the first part of your Friday with me. I hope the next part of your Friday is just as great as the first part. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
This is Dorothy Yates. No further business. I move we adjourn.
This is Calvin Locklear. I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? All right, you guys have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Take care, everybody.